Welcome, everybody. We are going to have the most exciting discussion here this afternoon. So, I have a great pleasure in introducing to you some wonderful people who are going to talk today about themselves. There is nothing people like more than talking about themselves. So these people are going to have a great time. Now, I'm going to introduce them to you one at a time, and they're going to join us. First of all, Lenny Antonelli. He's a journalist. Welcome. I have a wonderful woman coming up next, and her name is Brid, Conneely, and she has flown all the way from Copenhagen, and she is the EcoSchool's International Director of FEE. Next up, I can't hear the claps. Is anybody clapping here? Okay. Richard Cronin. Richard is a policy advisor. Now, Catherine Farrell, and she's with Bord Namona. Great to have you, Catherine. And finally, but not least, as they say, Mike Haslam, and he's an architect with Sol. Great to have you here. Can I tell you what we're going to do? I'm going to introduce one by one our panel here today, and they are going to talk for 2 minutes about themselves. And that's going to be very illustrative, because what we're talking here today about are careers. And so they're going to be telling you about their career. And I'm not going to preempt what they're going to say, so I'm going to start straight away. And I'm going to ask, who's first up? Lenny Antonelli, the journalist. You're first up, Lenny.
Good stuff. Hi, my name's...
A big round of applause.
My name's Lenny. I work as a journalist and editor and writer. I actually studied marine science in NUI Galway back in 2003. And while I was there, I worked as editor of the college newspaper, and kind of decided afterwards to combine my interest in media and in science and in environmental stuff, and pursue a career in journalism. So I work part-time for a magazine called Passive House Plus, which is a sustainable building and architecture magazine. And I freelance part-time as well, and that can include writing about environmental issues, travel, outdoor pursuits a lot for different national and international publications. And I published a book last year, a hiking guidebook as well, which was a nice little side project to do. Yeah, I think that's it. Can't think of anything else, really.
Thank you very much indeed, Lenny. Now, I can tell you all that at the end of this session, we will be having a question and answer session. So you can be thinking up really difficult questions for them, okay? Thank you very much, Lenny. Now, we have Brid Conneely from Copenhagen. Actually, she's Irish, but we won't hold that against her.
Hi, everybody. It's really great to be here. I'm going to go very quickly through my varied career. 13 years old, babysitter. Great job. 16, working behind the counter in the first burger bar in Galway. Great job. Dartmouth Advertising Agency, London, 1 year. Great job. Department of the Environment, Dublin. Okay job. Cleaner at a tattoo parlor, Copenhagen, Denmark, 6 months. Terrific job. English language teacher, Copenhagen, Denmark, 14 years. Great job. Irish Tourist Board, Copenhagen. First brush with the commercial world. Great job. 1 year. British Council, Arts Manager and Science Manager. 6 years. Great job. Copenhagen, Denmark. first brush with true environmental work. International Eco Schools Manager, Denmark, present job, 3.5 years. Love my job. That's all I have to say for now. Looking forward to your questions.
Well done, Brid. Thank you very much indeed. And now we're moving on to Richard Cronin. And it says here he's a policy advisor. So let's see what he's advising us today.
Hello, and thank you very much, and thank you for that. My primary degree, what I studied in university, was civil engineering, and I spent most of my career working as a civil engineer. I worked for local authorities. I have built motorways, I've built runways for Air Rianta, I have built sewage treatment plants, I have built water supply schemes, and in the last 10 or 15 years of my career, I moved into the Department of Environment, and despite what Brid says, it's an amazing place to work. It's full of lovely, lovely people. And I spent a lot of my time there before Irish Water was created, and the years before that, doing all the things you now see them doing. And once they were established, I found an opportunity to work in the marine environment. So working as an advisor, a policy advisor for the government on the marine environment, and laterally on marine spatial planning. And to say I love it would be an understatement. It sounds boring being a policy advisor, but the type of work I do and the people I meet and the decisions I get to make and the influence I have, I love my job a tremendous amount, despite having to wear a suit to keep you all impressed by me today. Thanks very much.
I have a feeling that his boss is here today, don't you? Well done. Catherine Farrell from Bordnamona is going to tell us about her career.
My name is Catherine. I'm an ecologist, and it's great to be here today. It's great to see so many young faces, and I hope you're all aspiring to be ecologists and not policy advisors, although ecologists should be policy advisors as well. So, 2 minutes. So I grew up on a small farm in County Westmeath. It's a small dairy farm, and that, I guess, inspired a love for nature and the outdoors. I really wanted to be a zoologist and save the lions and the tigers in Africa, but somehow I managed saving creepy crawlies on cutaway bogs. So I don't know how I missed out on, the big career there, but anyway, I studied botany and zoology in UCD, and that led on to walking down the hall in my 4th year of ecology and seeing a sign, "Would you like to do a PhD on bogs in Mayo?" And I thought that was the most exotic place in the world to be, so I said, I want to go to Mayo. And I guess I never looked back. It was a great opportunity. It was 6,500 hectares of bog that needed love and care and restoration. And that suited me down to the ground. And then I finished that up, and then I moved up to the Midlands. And now I work for Bordnamona, guiding them on how they should rehabilitate and restore their bogs. It's an absolutely diverse job. I never thought I'd be sitting up here talking to people like you, saying what I do, but I work in my wellies most days. It's a very glamorous job. I wear full wet gear, and then from time to time I go into universities and I talk to scientists about maybe setting up greenhouse gas monitoring projects. I see you here, John Sweeney. We talked about carbon. So it's a really, really diverse career. And yeah, be an ecologist. The world needs ecologists.
Well done, Catherine. So now Mike Haslam, and he is an architect.
That's right. Thank you very much. So I actually have 2 jobs, I suppose, officially. One is I am a director or co-director of my architectural practice, which is Sol Earth, based here in Dublin. And we are I suppose we specialise in what we call green design, and that's a range of projects from visitor centres in wetlands through to sort of more socially based projects for Camp Hill communities and people like that. And we've been working for about 16 years now, and my second job is connected with that. I teach in DIT in the School of Architecture there, where I work as a studio tutor, effectively teaching trying to teach what I preach and perform in life. Before then, I've studied in the UK. I worked in Spain and in Germany, as well as in the UK. And so this is a kind of, last 16 years, I suppose, has been the fulfillment of those years of training. Thank you.
Well done. Okay, so are you having any difficulty hearing us? There is a bit of noise coming from my right here, but I hope you can hear us. I see some people nodding. Eileen, you have your hand up, so I don't know what that means. People at the back, can you hear? You can. Okay, they can. They can hear. It's okay. You can relax. Thank you. I suppose I should finish the panel introductions by telling you something about myself. I'll try not to go on for the next half an hour. I started my working career as a secretary, and one day I went out on a tour of Dublin with a man called Peter Pearson, who did a walking tour of Dublin, and I became totally enamored of the buildings of Dublin. I come from the inner city. And he said, are you a member of An Taisce? And I said, no. This is 35 years ago, I think. Anyway, I became really interested in the work of An Taisce based on the interest they had in heritage buildings. However, to cut it short, I was involved in publishing and journalism, so I ended up being the editor of the An Taisce magazine. And interestingly enough, if you edit a magazine of an organization, you go right to the heart of that organization very quickly, because you will know this as a journalist. You get to know so many people in the organization that you get a wider view of it than most people who are just ordinary members or are part of a committee. So I very quickly became very knowledgeable about the whole organization. And then I was a volunteer, of course, and then I was elected honorary secretary, then deputy chair, and then I became national chairwoman of An Taisce. And all of that time, I was also working full-time as a journalist and publisher. However, when I stepped down from the chair of An Taisce back in 1992, I decided that the one thing I really wanted to do was to stop campaigning, which is so frustrating, and do something really positive. And so we began the environmental education unit of An Taisce, and at that time we had no staff. Today we have 54 staff and we have 8 programs. So that was 22 years ago, and today is the culmination of a dream. Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to put these people here beside me under the microscope. We're going to ask some questions. They're all looking very nervous. These are easy questions. I'm going to throw them out and see who picks them up, okay? And then we'll ask you to ask some questions from the floor. But this is just to get it going. Okay, so the first question is, why did you choose this career?
It chose me.
I don't know if you found with journalism, but if you're a person who's interested in the world and in places and in people and things, journalism is a great career to pursue because you don't necessarily have to specialize. I mean, lots of journalists specialize, but you can write about one thing one week, one thing the next week. So if you're a person who's very curious about the world and in people and the environment and science or whatever field you're interested in, journalism is a really good career for exploring the world further, I think. That was the main reason for me.
I studied civil engineering. My mum wanted me to be a doctor, so that was the first thing on my CEO form, but I wasn't smart enough to do medicine, which is probably for the benefit of all the doctors out there. I wanted to be a chemical engineer, but I didn't pay enough attention in school, so I came out of school and civil engineering was next to my list, and I had spent 3 weeks wandering around Europe with a rucksack, and when I came back from that, that's what was in front of me, and I said, I'll do that. Didn't really bother me at the time. And the work I do now as a policy advisor, which sounds quite boring, I will admit that, but policy is just what do we want to do? That's what policy is. So policy is what's the right thing to do or what's the best thing to do. So I spent over 20 years working away, doing the stuff, and then wondering why we were doing the stuff. And when the opportunity arose to be the person who made the decision about what we should do, in this case for the environment and the marine environment in particular, I couldn't stop myself from putting my hand up. I was jumping up and down like the kid at the back of the class. So that's how I ended up where I am now. But it was a long, long way from where I was in terms of career progression.
Very good.
Well, for me, I love nature. And so it was inevitable that I would study it. But one of the things that I found when studying, like to be an academic wasn't good enough for me. It had to be actually translating that into doing and into action. And so, I started off very much in actually learning about what happens when you block a drain, what happens when you try to re-wet or rehabilitate. And then when I had that knowledge, it was up to me to share it. And then sharing it, raising awareness, that's fine. And then you get to the next level, which Richard is at, which is trying to influence policy and influence decisions. So you're not listened to unless you fully understand what you're trying to talk about. So it's to understand yourself. Then it's to be able to communicate about it, and then to be able to make meaningful change. And that, to me, is what I'm driven by. That's the driving force. I don't know if I ever wanted to be here, but everything I've ever done has led me to that point.
Okay. So yeah, I was one of those people who kind of knew what they wanted to do at school, and I think what drove me where I was going was I had two sort of loves or passions when I was at school in terms of subjects. One was geography and the environment around, and the other was design and making things. In particular, I suppose buildings, but plans. And I think the combination of the two, one which was very much about reading the world around you, and the other one was trying to find something constructive, positive, hopefully, to do in that world around. And how those two met was for me going to be architecture, and specifically green architecture. So that was really put me on the track, and that went, as I say, I went straight into architecture school. And that took me out and through. Thanks.
Well, I suppose I should answer the question as well. And it reminded me when Brid said, I didn't choose it, it chose me. And the interesting thing from my point of view is that when I began the education unit 22 years ago, of course, I was a volunteer. And I only became the full-time director in the year 2000. But I retired last June. And over many years, I would have young people, when I'd be visiting schools, particularly secondary schools, saying to me, what was your career plan? And I always had to say, I never had a career plan because I was too busy dancing. Because when I was young, it never occurred to me to have a career. I just wanted a job to give me some money, to buy some clothes, and to go out and have a good time. But I found when I was involved with An Taisce that I was very good at fundraising. Now, I have to confess that I knew absolutely nothing about the environment. I was good at organisation and I was good at fundraising. And any organisation worth its salt treasures the people in it who, it doesn't matter if they don't know anything about the organisation, but if they can raise funds, I'm joking, of course, but I have to say that when I was elected chairwoman, I was very, very nervous. I felt I knew so little about the environment that I could be wrong-footed by journalists like Lenny here at any moment. But the one thing that I did have in An Taisce, and thankfully to this day still have in An Taisce, are wonderful experts. And one of them is here, and I'm looking down at him, and he's just a former president of An Taisce, and that's Professor John Sweeney, of course, the well-known climatologist. And it was people like him, when I was in the chair, that I knew that I could lean my back against them and that they would be there. So if I was asked a hard question, I can tell you, I always made sure somebody like John was standing beside me. So on that note, I shall move on. Let's see. What is a typical day in your work life like?
I'll start this time. A typical day is quite mixed for me, I suppose, because I am at the more managerial end, if you like, of the, if there's a hierarchy within the office. So it's quite office bound in that I will be spending a fair bit of my time designing, but there'll be a lot of that which will be sort of team talks, as in meetings with the people I work with, my colleagues. There will also be meetings with clients and with consultants, etc. Occasionally with journalists, but not so often. And then that'll be, I suppose, that's the most of the day will probably be around the office like that, but also out on site. I've just come from a site today down in Waterford, and there'll be site meetings, site visits, etc., watching the building get constructed, monitoring its construction, etc. And also there'll be site visits which are reviewing a site that you're designing with, understanding the site, etc. So there's a fair bit of inside and outside work.
Good.
Yeah, well, I'd like to say there was a typical day, but there's no such thing, so I'll maybe describe the two extremes. So my favourite kind of a day is where I throw the wellies in the boot of the car, I load up my little Cocker Spaniel who's 5, who loves the bog, and we basically head off to a bog and we walk the bog, we inspect it, we monitor, we see what's going on with the flora and fauna. The sun is shining, and I guess maybe that doesn't happen that often, but that's my favourite sort of a day. And that's, I suppose, what ecologists love, is getting out into the field, getting in touch with what it's all about. And then there's the other extreme, where you head into a boardroom with the senior management of the company and you meet with financial controllers and you meet with the managing director and you meet with the head of peat production, and you talk about why the environment is important. So you're challenged in a completely different way. And I suppose for a lot of the young girls out there, it's a very male-dominated environment as well, so I'm challenged on that front too, because you're often the one woman in a room of maybe 30 men who's sort of like, who's this little young one now? And I'm still classified as young in Portnamona. Who's this little young one now trying to tell us all about the environment? So those are the extremes. It's the balance of having the outdoors, fresh air, and the real world, and then being in a completely different situation, which is the indoors, and probably in a suit as well.
I think this sounds like a good job, don't you? I like the bit about the dog and the fresh air and the... Does she work at all, we ask ourselves?
I'll give you a really typical day is sitting at my desk drinking about 7 cups of coffee, sending emails. But those are the days you try to forget. A really stimulating day for me is, I'll give you an example of next week for me. I fly out to Brussels on Sunday evening of next week. I have a meeting with the European Commission about economics, the socioeconomics of the oceans on Monday. Then on Tuesday, I have a meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning with colleagues from Denmark, Romania, Portugal, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and we're going to discuss a coordination of our positions. So what can we cooperate on and what can we help each other with about new legislation, about the environment, the marine environment. And then we have 2 days of negotiations with the European Commission where we have very formal suit and tie negotiations, and then we have cups of coffee negotiations as well, more informal. So those are very stimulating days. You're operating at a very high level. It's very important work. You're communicating with people in the room and outside of the room all the time. The decisions you make are very, very significant and have long repercussions. So that's the sort of day that I suppose I live for. And I get to do a lot of that, more than my dog and my wife and my kids probably like, because if you can't tell from the accent, I'm not from Dublin, I don't live here, so I spend a lot of time travelling. I'm from the real capital, in Cork.
Now, Brid, travelling must be a huge part of your job.
I don't actually travel a lot at all. At least I try not to. My colleagues do. I try to ensure that, for instance, I'm here today, but I'm going to visit University of Limerick on tomorrow, on Friday, and on Monday I get to visit some schools working with the biodiversity theme. So that to me, then it's worth coming to Ireland because I've got 3 different meetings, plus I get to see my family during the weekend. The eco schools, which is what it's known as internationally, have 58 countries involved now. So I do a lot of Skyping with the various people on the ground in those various countries throughout the day. I spend a lot of time at my computer, unfortunately, answering emails, of course. I'm working at the moment with strategy for the next 4 years. I'm really working quite intensively. I'm going to begin when I get back to work with Eco Campus, which is what we call Green Campus internationally. We've got a expert group set up and we need to work on international guidelines, most of which will actually be based on the Green Campus guidelines. Policy, budget, trying to fundraise. We've begun to spend a lot more time fundraising, trying to budget for the poorer countries, try to get more projects off the ground for the poorer countries that are involved in the program, and lots more. And every now and then I get to go to a conference or speak on a panel.
Thank you, Brid. Okay, now, we're going to have Lenny next, and then I want you to be thinking up some really good questions because it's your turn next, okay?
Well, they all sound very exciting. I just sit at home in front of my computer all day, pretty much.
You don't doorstep people and harangue them on their...
I don't actually, no. I work from home, which is interesting. It's something that I really enjoy. I really like the freedom of it, of being able to work for myself at home. I recommend people try it if you think you have the discipline to be self-motivated enough to do it. I probably spend most of my day either conducting interviews over the phone or writing articles and answering emails. Probably going out for coffee a lot because I get a bit of cabin fever working from home. But also I do a bit of work writing about hiking and cycling and canoeing and stuff for different travel supplements and magazines. So sometimes I can go and do fun things on a weekday and call it work. But those aren't the typical days.
Thank you very much indeed, Lenny. I think it may be instructions for getting your bus. But don't run away from us because it's your turn now. And I'm going to stand up and I'm going to try and look down and see who's here and say, has anybody got their hand up to ask a question to our panel? We have a very distinguished group here, all doing different jobs. And now, okay, can you tell me your name? Okay.
My name's Blonid, and I have a question for Lenny. What made you want to become a journalist from doing marine biology?
Could you say that again?
What made you want to be a journalist from studying marine biology?
I was always interested in journalism, and I was always interested in nature and wildlife. So I decided to study marine science and zoology, and to pursue journalism on the side, because I kind of figured that if I wanted to pursue a career in journalism, I could do it without a degree in journalism, but if I wanted to do the science, I would need a qualification. And I really enjoyed my degree, but for my final year research project, I loved learning about the oceans and science and nature, but I didn't really like lab-based research that much, so it kind of put me off the idea of doing a PhD or going into research. So I decided then to give journalism a try and maybe write about some of the stuff that I was learning, like about the environment and about wildlife and nature, and to kind of use journalism as a way to explore that.
Thank you, Lenny. Was that a good answer for you? I think that's a very interesting question, actually, because it brings up that whole thing of people of your age. You're going to university, you have to make a choice at that time, and you think, is this going to be my future career? And quite often, it's a good basic thing to have had a university degree, but quite often you find people have moved away. But that basic, I think the discipline of it is the thing that gives you the ability to move away maybe from your original choice. Thank you for the question. Have I another? Oh, a man. Who's that behind you? There's something familiar about the look of you.
Yeah.
What's your question?
Hi, I just have a question for the policy advisor. I'm just wondering how you move from being a civil engineer to a policy advisor, and how you stay ahead so that you are creating the best policy for the country.
As a politician would say, that's a very good question. So the transition, I was good at sums in school, to be very basic about it. And I was never really very shy either. So I was always acting on, say, when I was in school, I was in the school plays. But I was better at sums than acting. So I went off and did engineering. And I was very good at it, and I quite enjoyed it, but I wasn't a typical engineer. You know, I was quite vocal. I wasn't that much interested in the numbers. I could do it, you know. So then as I moved on, I got more and more frustrated by just doing stuff. So I understood why we were building the sewage plant. I understood why we needed better roads. I understood all these things, but I really felt that I was missing something. So the opportunity came to work for central government. And, you know, most of your career is an accident, and it's just about taking opportunities. So for me, it was an accident. I actually did a little spreadsheet, because I'm an engineer, of whether I should stay in my existing job or move. And the only difference was I could cycle to work if I moved. And that was a really trivial reason. There was no money in it. But I took it, and one thing leads to another, and that's how I became a policy advisor. And then staying ahead of the curve. How do I do that? One of the things, if you're an engineer, is you think you know everything. You know, and you have to work hard to convince others that you're right all the time. But one of the things with, say, where I work in the marine environment is it is vast. We have very low levels of knowledge. So the really key thing is to always stay curious. And this is one piece of advice I would give everybody. If you leave here with knowing nothing, stay curious. Stay questioning. Always try to understand why things are the way they are. And you will suddenly start to realize that you know a little bit more than everybody else, and that then gives you an edge in comparison to everybody else. And the other thing I would say is if you go to university and you study any of the sciences, what they'll teach you is how to converge onto a single solution. And I suppose where I work now, the big challenge has been policy isn't about one answer, it's about a menu of answers, and then knowing where the boundary between good answers and bad answers is. And this is the boundary between damaging the environment, sustainability, all these different terms we put on it, okay? So that's the big challenge as an engineer. My brain is now being programmed to give one answer, and I have to give a minister or the head civil servant 10 good answers or 4 good answers. So
I think that was a good answer, don't you?
Yeah, can I just ask one more thing? I'm an engineer as well, and I find it really difficult because I'm all about numbers. But I find writing essays and all that really difficult. And I'd imagine, as you said, you're good at numbers. Do you have to write a lot? A basic question.
Yes, I do. And it, at the start, was a big challenge because I love bullet points, for example. And I have realized as I've gotten older something that I didn't know when I was a kid, that, I confuse words a little bit. Right? So I have to work on all those things, but I know I do, so I've got cheats for it. So for example, before I send an email, I always give it half an hour. So if I'm sending a big email and I go back, I will often finish an email at 5 o'clock in the evening, and knowing that it needs a second read, I send it the next morning. So that's how I cope with those things. And I suppose the thing as you get older is you learn to realize what your strengths and weaknesses are. And if you really want to get on, you work on the things that are your weaknesses. So you don't just always run back to the thing you just love doing, which is a great temptation,
Thank you. Well, I've been given the signal that we have about 4 minutes left. So can I just say one thing? That I would, which is coming from left field as distinct from what you said. My thing has always been, and I say this to people who are looking ahead to their careers, try to always say yes. When an opportunity comes up, say yes, because quite often it's something that you don't think you can do, or you say yes and try. So, more questions. Yes, sir.
It's actually a similar question for Brid. Like, how did you make the jump?
I beg your pardon. I can't hear you.
Can you not hear me? Sorry. It was a similar question for Brid. How did you make the jump from teaching English as a foreign language into what you currently do now? Did you hear that?
How did I make the jump from teaching as a foreign language? I would say, as well as be curious, staying curious and saying yes, don't be afraid to leave a job if you're bored. Don't be afraid to leave a job if it's not working for you, if the people around you aren't giving you what you need. So I loved teaching for 14 years, and then I didn't. So I gave up. And I applied for, my background is, my first degree is English and theatre, and my second degree is screenwriting. Not much to do with environmentalism. The chance of a job with the British Council came up, and I took it, and it was arts to begin with, but then they were closing down their arts section in Copenhagen, in Denmark, and focusing on science. And the most important aspect of science at the time was environmentalism. So I had the job, I kind of put on that hat, and I developed there were 4 contacts in the office at the time with regard to environmentalism, and within the space of 2 years I had 200 contacts and developed quite a large program all across Europe. And I learned an awful lot, but I'm not an expert, so like Pat says, you have to surround yourself with experts as well. But I would say if you're not enjoying your job, give it up.
Thank you, Bri. Well, that's very good. We're ending on the note of, if you don't like the job, give it up. Well, isn't that the way to end? I'm not sure that I would agree with that totally. Stay in your job until you get another one, is what I say. Okay. Listen, I think that we have been very well served by our speakers, don't you? So let's say thank you very much to them with a big round of applause. Okay. Thank you.